Welcome back. Let us discuss the most valuable questions, part 2, Locomotion and Movement, Human Physiology, class 11th NCERT for NEET entrance examination. So let us be very clear at the outset before beginning the discussion of this chapter. Now please remember, this is a fact-packed. So large number of facts are there, and please try to limit yourself to the class 11th 12th syllabus and to your NEET entrance examination prescribed syllabus. We both know that almost always the question that will be going to be asked in your NEET entrance exam will be based on the text matter that is given in your NCERT textbook. There is a scope of getting lost here. You can actually go for PhD, which is not required. So when you appear in the NEET entrance examination, the education qualification required is class 12th. So when I appeared in the PMT, I was absolutely sure that the class 12th syllabus must be absolutely clear to me. And then when I entered the medical college, then was the time to understand everything about the skeletal system. And this opportunity will be coming to you as well once you are selected in the NEET entrance exam and get a seat in a good medical college of your choice. And please remember when I say if you are selected, and the most important thing right now before your NEET entrance exam, if you want to get selected in the NEET entrance exam, is to go for smart study. And no knowledge is bad. I tell all my students repeatedly, no knowledge is bad. But if you do not know something is not in your fact-based, what you would say, recollection system that is stored in your brain and is not a part of NCERT. So it is very prudent that please leave it for now and leave it for after selection in the medical college. This is the most important thing that I can tell you right before your NEET entrance exam. We and you both should try as much as possible to limit ourselves to the content given in NCERT textbook. With this thing in mind and understanding that this is basically a simple fact-based type of chapter, let me tell you some important facts here. The first thing would be that what are the functions of the skeletal system? So let us say what are the functions of the skeletal system. So let me make a list. So we will say it will provide a structural framework, it will provide the support to the body, as you can easily understand. The second thing would be it will have a protective function, so it will provide protection to the soft internal organs of the human body. Third, because of the attachment of the skeletal muscle, it will be involved in locomotion. These are some of the most important functions that are served by the human skeletal system. And the fourth would be, please remember the formation of blood cells, and we must remember the red bone marrow, and we must also remember that it's a storehouse of large number of minerals, say for example calcium, phosphate, and especially calcium, you know, is important in very large number of physiological processes in human beings, and that includes blood clotting, that includes muscle contraction, etc., and is a very, very important second messenger as well. So this would be question number 1. Now, if we look at the human body, so we will say that the head of a human, the thorax of the human, and the abdomen of the human form the axis of the human body. So this is my axis. So the skeleton that is present here would be called as the axial skeleton. So I am saying that the human skeleton can be axial, and if you can see that the first two functions, the structural framework, the support, and the protection to the internal organs. Try to think, you have read this chapter, try to think what are the bones present here, and you can understand what are the functions of the axial skeleton in human beings, the main function. And now I hang the limbs here. So these are the jointed limbs. So you know that we have joints, and these are what are called as the upper limb. And I need something to hang the limb bones to the axial skeleton. So I will require what is called as a girdle, and there would be a shoulder girdle or a pectoral girdle and a hip girdle or pelvic girdle, and this girdle and the limb will form what is called as the appendicular skeleton. I hope now you understand what is meant by appendages and what is the axis of the human body. So in the appendicular skeleton, you will see that there are limbs and there are girdles. And finally, in the limbs, there would be upper limb and lower limb. In the girdle, there would be a shoulder and a hip girdle. The shoulder girdle is called as the pectoral, and this one is called as the pelvic girdle. So very fast recollection of the facts that can be asked here. In the axial skeleton, you will have the skull and some of the bones that are present in the skull region. Why I have differentiated them, I will tell you right now. And then you will see that there is the rib cage, the vertebral column, there would be rib cage, and there would be what is called as the breastbone. The breastbone, what is also called as the sternum. And we know that in an adult human body, the skull would have 22 bones. So please, there is a gray area here where various authors define skull with different number of bones. But the most expected, most followed one is that the skull should have 22 bones, and this is what is given in your NCERT as well. Yes, in this region there are 6 ear ossicles and a hyoid bone, so that makes it 7. So this is actually in the entire region would be 29. But if we are asked a question that how many bones are present in the human skull, we are going by NCERT answer, and this would be 22. And in the adult human beings, the vertebral column will have 26 vertebrae, and the rib cage will have 12 pairs of ribs, which will be 24, and there would be a breastbone. So 29 plus 1 would be 30, and 26 plus 24 would be 50, and the total number of bones in the adult human body would be 80 in axial skeleton. If you look at the appendicular skeleton, each limb will have 30 bones, and because there are 2 limbs, so this would be 2 into 30, which is 60 bones here. 2 into 30 in each lower limb, this would be 60 bones here. This makes a total of 120 bones in the human limbs, the 4 of them, and 2 upper and 2 lower limb. The pectoral girdle will have 2 bones on each side, so this will make it as 4. The pelvic bone will have 1 bone on each side. This would be a total of 2, and you can understand the grand total here becomes 126, and the complete number of bones in the adult human skeleton comes out to be 206. I hope this simple thing you actually know, and this is good to revise right now. So 206, this number would be more than around 270 in a very young infant, and some of the bones actually fuse during the development. In the adult, the number of bone gets reduced to a total number which is 206. So this is the first question that you can now very easily do. And now let us look at the skull part. So we are beginning the questions that can be asked from the region of the axial skeleton, and we are saying that in human skull, where we say there are 22 bones, 8 are in cranium, the brain box, and 14 are facial. So here is a diagram that is given in your NCERT. So please try to remember the names of the cranial bones and the facial bones, because there is a diagram that is given in NCERT, though they are not mentioned in your text matter. So you get your NCERT right now. Look at this diagram. Let me show you. There would be a frontal bone, an occipital bone at the back. There would be 2 parietal bones. There will be 2 temporal bones and a sphenoid bone. So these are the bones that will be present in your cranium. So cranium would be, let us write it down, other we will miss something. We are saying there is 1 frontal. At the front, obviously, there is an occipital. At the back, this makes it 2. There are 2 parietal bones. There are 2 temporal bones, and there is a sphenoid bone, and there is an ethmoid bone. So that makes it 8. So just try to remember the name of the cranial bones. No need for remembering the names of the facial bones. Just I will give you some idea about the important facial bones just before your NEET entrance exam. But try to remember this particular thing. So ethmoid is 1. Actually, the total would be 8. Now, what are the questions that can be asked? Occipital bone has the foramen, which is called as the foramen magnum, and through which the spinal cord actually joins the brainstem, and it has two condyles, and these condyles are placed onto the first cervical vertebra, and that cervical vertebra is actually called as the atlas vertebra. And because there are two occipital condyles just by the side of the foramen magnum, the human skull is actually called as dicondylic. So this is an important question that can be asked. It will be good if you remember that in the sphenoid bone there is a saddle-like depression which is called as sella turcica, which is the location of the pituitary gland. And these are the things that probably this should be enough. And if you look at the facial bones, please try to remember the maxillae. The maxillae will have the sockets for the upper jaw teeth, and the mandible will have the socket for the lower jaw teeth. So try to remember at least there is a paired, we will say, the maxillae bone. It has a sinus, it can cause maxillary sinusitis, and there is a single bone which is actually called as mandible. So this is something very clearly in our mind, that we are looking only at NCERT and the possible questions in the NEET entrance examination. And in this region you will have the 3 ear ossicles. We will talk about the ear ossicles in more detail when we will be studying about the human ear, and they are the malleus, incus and stapes. The malleus is like a hammer, incus is like a navel, and stapes is like a stirrup. Stapes or stapes is actually incidentally the smallest bone in the human body, and they are the 3 ossicles, 3 on each side, that would make it as 6. And there is a sort of U-shaped bone, and this bone does not articulate with any other bone in the human body, but provides the posterior attachment to the muscular organ which is called as the tongue, and this bone is actually called as hyoid. So hyoid provides the posterior attachment to the tongue. So now again we are looking at the 22 bones here, the 6 ear ossicles 28, and a hyoid which is 29, and these are the possible questions. Please try to understand that what we are trying to do here is to see something which is given in the NCERT, which we consider should be the most important agenda for us before going to the NEET entrance examination. Now when you come back, you will see that there would be vertebra, and these vertebra has a vertebral column, and it is divided into the neck region which is called as the cervical. Then there is thoracic region, then this is followed by what is called as lumbar region, then there is sacral region, and finally there is a coccygeal region, what is called as the coccyx. Now the total number of cervical vertebrae are 7. Almost all mammals have 7 cervical vertebrae, with a possible exception if it is good, it is good if you try to remember it. It is manatee, and there are some sloths as well which do not have 7 cervical vertebrae. Otherwise, whether it is giraffe or human being, all of us have 7 cervical vertebrae. Please try to remember that the first cervical vertebra is called as the atlas because it bears the occipital condyles, and the second one is called as the axis. So this is C1 and C2. Please try to remember this. There in the axis there is what is called as a dens or an odontoid process. It forms a joint with axis vertebra, and this joint is actually a type of synovial joint which is called as pivot, and this joint is atlanto-axial joint. So this is why this is important. Please try to remember the atlanto-axial joint, and the joint is actually a pivot which is a type of synovial joint. Now the thoracic vertebra are 12 in number. You can easily identify the thoracic vertebra because they will have the dorsal facets for attachment to the ribs. So the ribs actually are 12 pairs. There are 12 thoracic vertebra. You can easily understand the dorsal attachment of the rib is to the thoracic vertebra, and now you can explain 12 thoracic vertebra and you can explain 12 pairs of the rib. And total number of lumbar vertebrae are 5, sacral vertebrae are 1, and coccyx are 1. In the earlier age, this number used to be 5. It has fused into single, and this number used to be 4. And therefore, if you look at this number, this is 12 plus 7 plus 12, which is 19, 24, 25 and 26. and you will have to add this 7 here, and this would make 33 vertebra in very early age, but it has been reduced to 26 in the human adult. So these are the possible questions that they can ask. Now please remember that a vertebra is having, so general part of the vertebra, there is a body, so we are talking of a typical vertebra, and there is a vertebral arch. This vertebral arch has some processes. These stout processes, they are called as the pedicel, and then you have what is called as the lamina, and you can see that it is surrounding an opening. This is called as the vertebral foramen, and this is pedicel, this is lamina, and where you see the joining of the pedicel and the lamina, you will see the transverse processes, and at this place you will have what you can feel at your back, which is called as the spinous process. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 processes. 7 processes in a typical vertebra. There is a body or a centrum. This thing is called as the vertebral foramen. All vertebral foramen together will form the vertebral canal and will provide protection to the spinal cord that is present here. So this would be the parts of a typical vertebrae. Now let us come to the ribs. And if you look at the human ribs, they are bicephalic, so that means their head has the 2 facets to, so actually each head binds at 2 places to the thoracic vertebra, not necessarily the same thoracic vertebra, let us leave it for our higher classes, but it has actually two heads to attach dorsally to the thoracic vertebra, and hence the human ribs are called as bicephalic, and the ventral attachment is directly or indirectly to the sternum. And let us first look at the sternum. The breastbone has a sheet-like process, and this process is called as the manubrium. This is called as manubrium. Mind you, it has a very active red bone marrow that makes large number of RBCs even in adult stage, and then there is the basic body of the sternum, and then there is a xiphoid process, what is called as the xiphisternum. And here you will see the facets for the attachment to the ventral attachment to the ribs. Say for example like this, the first 7 ribs, they have their own attachment to the sternum, and this is through a costal cartilage. So you can easily understand the word which is called as a costal cartilage. If you remember your tissue chapter, please try to recollect what type of cartilage is actually the costal cartilage. So the pair 1 to 7, they are vertebro-sternal. They have their individual attachments ventrally to the sternum through their own costal cartilage. So they are called as vertebro-sternal and very frequently also called as the true ribs. And if this is the 7th rib, the 8th, 9th and 10th cartilage, costal cartilage, actually attached to the sternum through the costal cartilage of the 7th, and therefore because they are ventrally attached to a cartilage themselves, so this is called as vertebro. And please try to remember the name of the cartilage. This would have word chondro, and this is vertebrochondral ribs. They are also called as false rib. This is 8th pair, 9th pair, 10th pair. So when I am talking about pair, they can ask you the actual number, which would be total 6 ribs that would be actually false or vertebrochondral, and the 11th and the 12th pair do not have what is called as a ventral attachment, and therefore they are called as the floating ribs. It is not so that they do not provide any function. They actually provide protection to the organs like spleen on the left side and kidneys on both sides as well. So these are the questions they can ask you about the ribs. And please remember, ribs also make RBCs in adulthood. This is something very important to understand. Please try to recollect the intercostal muscles right now and try to understand what is the function in pulmonary ventilation of these internal intercostal. How many intercostal muscles actually do you know, and what is the action brought about by the contraction of the respective intercostal muscles that you are able to recollect. So these are the questions that are possible from this part, the ribs. So we have done the skull, the region of the skull, we have done the vertebrae, we have done the ribs, and we have done the sternum as well. So these are the 80 bones that are present in the axial skeleton. So now very fast I am coming on to the upper limb. So please do not try to read a lot about the lower limb. Just try to remember the names of the bones in the lower limb and some peculiarities, 2 or 3 peculiarities that I will be telling you. If you remember all this, you should be good in your NEET entrance examination. But please, again, I am telling you again and again, do not try to do a lot, do not try to wonder a lot in this chapter. Let us leave everything to after our selection. But if you know something, it is always good. And for the sake of boring repetition, let me say it again. No knowledge is bad. If you know something, I am not saying that it is actually bad, forget it. I am not saying that. I am saying if you do not know something that I am talking about inadvertently as well, and what happens is, suppose you hear a word from me that you actually do not know and it is not in NCERT. So, and you are limited on time. So please do not pursue it very vigorously. That can be a waste of time here. Now, see, I am very straightforward here. I am very straightforward. This is just before NEET entrance exam. I don't have time to waste. You have to attempt physics, you have to attempt chemistry, you have to attempt botany, you have to attempt zoology as well. I have to teach only zoology. So there is a difference between your pressure and my pressure. I have cleared the NEET entrance exam. I have been for many years in a medical college. I have been teaching a large number of students like you for more than 20 years. So that is the reason why I actually am able to say so much about zoology. Just try to understand the facts of the life. And let us be very, very clear that what exactly our goal and aim is, and we should smartly pursue that particular goal. Only then it becomes feasible. And no knowledge is bad, but now is not the time to add the knowledge that is not given in NCERT to your repertoire. This is what I am actually trying to emphasize. Now coming on to the appendicular skeleton, we will talk about the upper limb. So yes, I will be giving a sort of relatively detailed type of discussion of the upper limb. So this part is called as the arm, and this part is called as the forearm. This is the wrist and hand. Now please understand what exactly is hand in anatomy. This would be forearm and this would be arm, and obviously at this place you have the wrist. The arm has one bone, and this bone is called as the humerus. So the one bone that is present in the arm, this is called as the humerus. There are two bones which are present in the forearm. The lateral one is called as the radius, and the medial one is called as the ulna. So this is medial, this is lateral. This is what you need to remember. And then you have at wrist, there are 8 carpal bones. So 8 carpal bones at wrist. And then you have the hand. In the hand you have 5 metacarpals. And you have 14 phalanges. So if you look at this number, this would be 19, 27, 29 and 130. So 30 in each upper limb would make a total of 60 bones. So this is the medial side of the humerus. It has a head-like structure that makes or articulates or forms a joint with the glenoid cavity of the scapula, and this is a glenohumeral joint. So right now I am telling you another very, very important question. The head of the humerus articulates. Articulation would mean joint. So it articulates with the glenoid cavity that is present on the lateral side of the scapula bone, and this forms a type of synovial joint, a very important, highly movable ball and socket joint. And then you will have the lower end of the humerus, and it will have some epicondyles, and it will have a pulley-like structure which is called as trochlea. If you do not know, please leave it. And then you come on to what are called as the radius and ulna. The radius is the lateral bone and the ulna is the medial bone. So this ulna fits into this trochlea. It forms the humero-ulnar joint. It is one of the joints that is present in the elbow, and along with the knee joint, it is again a type of synovial joint which is called as the hinge joint. So just remember, I will show you all the joints that are given in your NCERT, mostly in the upper limb itself. And then there are there are some flat bones, and there are some bones, not flat bones, there are some bones, and they are actually present in 2 rows of 4 each, and these are the 8 carpal bones. These are the 8 carpal bones. The joint between them would be a gliding joint or a plane joint. So you are looking at, look at this, you are looking at a glenohumeral joint. So glenohumeral joint between the glenoid cavity of the scapula and the head of the humerus. This would be, I said, that ball and socket joint. You are looking at what is called as the humero-ulnar joint, and along with the knee joint, you know that this is a hinge joint. And then you say that there is a proximal radioulnar and a distal radioulnar joint apart from the atlantoaxial joint. The proximal and the distal radioulnar joints are also pivot. So they are also pivot, and these are the carpal bones, and in the carpal bones we will say there are plane joints, or what are sometimes also called as the gliding joints. So can you see that all the types of the synovial joints that are given in your NCERT are being described practically here. Now what I have done is that I have made this limb pretty lengthy, so I will have to make the digits very, very small. So this is an artistic problem. This is an artistic problem. Okay, let us try to shift it slightly higher, and forgive me for this, thoda chota kar lete hain, like this, and then let us see, this would be this is the anatomical position. So we are looking at the digit here, and this is the first carpo-metacarpal joint. So this is the first carpo-metacarpal joint. These are the 5 metacarpals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are the 5 metacarpals somewhere here, and this is the first carpo-metacarpal joint. Here the 2 articulating surfaces are something like this, clasping each other, and this type of joint at the base of the thumb, the first carpo-metacarpal joint, is actually called as the saddle joint. So again, an important thing. And then obviously you will have the phalanges 3, 3, 3, 3, and remember 2 here, and the interphalangeal joint, you can see they are actually the hinge joints again. So interphalangeal joints are also hinge joint, and this would be this joint would be metacarpophalangeal. So this joint would be metacarpophalangeal. This can be condyloid. So this joint is called as condyloid. So difference between ball and socket would be that there is in ball and socket there is a distinct head-like structure that goes into something which is called as a cavity. But what happens in condyloid is that one of the surfaces is convex, the other is concave slightly. So this is the difference between the two. So this type of joint would be called as a ball and socket, and that would be called as the condyloid, sometimes also called as ellipsoidal joint. So I hope all these things are now absolutely clear. Now you know about the 30 bones that are given in the upper limb. So when we come to the lower limb, there would be an area which would be called as thigh. Try to remember your upper limb. There was an area which was called as the arm, and then you have thigh. This thigh region has the largest bone of your body, 1 in number. This is called as the femur, and the head of the femur again articulates with a acetabulum. This acetabulum will be present in the coxal bone of the pelvic girdle, and this would again be a very, very important ball and socket joint, the largest ball and socket joint in the human beings. As you know that ball and sockets are the most movable of the joints. And then you will have the corresponding to the forearm, the region which is called as leg, and similarly we will have 2 bones. One would be called as the tibia and other is called as the fibula. So please try to remember the names, and instead of the wrist you have now ankle, and ankle has 7 tarsals. So do not try to remember the name of the tarsals. Do not think that N.K. Sharma doesn't know it. So these are calcaneum, talus, navicular and the cuneiform, but please leave it. These are the bones that are present in the ankle. There is a cuboid as well, but please remember there is no need of remembering it. And then there would be some metatarsals. They would be 5 in number, and again in the foot. So this region would be called as foot, and there would be 14 phalanges, and now you can see the number adds up only to 29. So there is a sesamoid bone, a bone that ossifies within the tendon of a muscle, and this time the muscle is actually quadriceps femoris, and the particular head of the quadriceps femoris in which tendon it actually gets ossified is rectus femoris, and this is forms the kneecap, which is actually called as patella. So there is a kneecap as well, and now you have your number as 30, and each lower limb has 30 bones, so that makes it 60. And now we know about the 120 bones that are given in your that are present in your body. Now, looking at the girdle, now that means there is a pectoral girdle, and this pectoral girdle has on each side has two bones. One is forming the shoulder blade, which is called as the scapula, and the second one, which is called as the scapula. Scapula forms the shoulder blade. And the important questions to know about scapula would be that if you remember that glenoid cavity on the lateral aspect of it and the glenohumeral joint, which is a ball and socket joint, please try to remember something about this process that you see on the dorsal side of the scapula. This is called as the acromion process, and it actually forms articulation with the lateral end of the clavicle, and this forms what is called as the acromioclavicular joint. So in scapula, please remember the two joints. One would be the glenohumeral, so I am writing it again, glenohumeral, and the second would be acromioclavicular. So please remember this very simple aspect. So this is the bone of the limb, and this bone is humerus. I have to suspend it to the axial skeleton. So what I am doing is that this is forming an articulation with the glenoid cavity. So this glenoid cavity is present in the scapula bone. So this is present in the scapula bone. It is a girdle bone. The scapula bone has a process which is actually called as the acromion, and this acromion articulates with a bone which is called as the clavicle. So this is what is called as the clavicle, and clavicle articulates with the bone of the axial skeleton, which is the sternum. So this is now very easy to understand. So the limb bone gets articulated with the girdle bone articulates with the axial skeleton, and this is how the limb is suspended. This is how the limb is actually suspended to the axial skeleton. That is the basic function of the girdle. And as I told you that these are the two important joints of scapula that you must know, and this bone is actually called as clavicle, and this clavicle on the lateral aspect has an acromioclavicular articulation, and here you can see that there is an articulation with the sternum, what is called as the sternoclavicular joint. And now you can understand how this thing is suspended to the axial skeleton of your body. Now, if we look at the pelvic girdle, there is one bone on either side. The bone is called as the coxal bone. Now please try to remember the terms. This coxal bone is formed by the fusion of three, which is called, one is called as ischium, the other is called as the ilium, and I should have written the other way around. So let us write it properly. A large blade-like structure, this would be called as ilium. So I am writing in capitals so that you remember the spelling. It is not with an E, which is a part of the human intestine, the small intestine. And there is a bone which is called as ischium, and there is a bone which is called as the pubis. And it has a foramen. This foramen is called as obturator foramen. And there is, if you remember on the lateral side, a cavity which is actually called as the acetabulum, and this acetabulum articulates with the head of the femur. It will be prudent if you look at the diagram given in your NCERT. These are the questions that they basically ask, and this forms a basin-like cavity, and which is called as the pelvic cavity. You know, the reproductive organs are located in the human beings here, and the two pubis bones actually articulate with each other ventrally and through a cartilaginous joint. This cartilaginous joint is actually called as symphysis, and this type of symphysis is actually called as pubic symphysis. So these are the questions that they can ask you about the pelvic girdle. I hope now you have understood the various bones that are present in the girdle as well. Now we have a fair idea of all the bones, the possible questions that can be asked in the NEET entrance exam. And finally, let us have a very fast overview of the joints. So we are looking at the joints. If you look at the joints according to the tissue that is present in the joint, there can be a fibrous joint. Obviously, this would be having collagen filled. And if you look at the physiological aspect, these will be the joints that will be practically immovable. So they do not allow any motility. And so you will see that these joints, they are present in the skull. They are called as the suture, and the tooth actually in the socket. And this joint, actually I should not name it, leave it, but since I have uttered it, just giving you one name, this would be called as gomphosis. And as I am telling you again and again, this thing is not going to come in the NEET entrance exam. So please try to remember sutures. And I spoke inadvertently, so that is why I am actually completing the word, but I had no intention to telling you all the names. I am not going to tell you what is synchondrosis, what is amphiarthrosis, what is diarthrosis. So many students, they love these all terminologies. And please remember, this is the NEET entrance exam final preparation, and we are acting very smart here. Now, the second joint would be containing obviously cartilage. And as I told you, one of the cartilaginous joint would be the symphysis. And I told you about the pubic symphysis. Similarly, the intervertebral disc is also a cartilaginous joint. So intervertebral disc is also a cartilaginous joint. Just try to remember the joint between the manubrium and the body of the sternum is also a cartilaginous joint. So in the midline, you will have some symphysis, and you have an intervertebral disc, you have pubic symphysis, and these are the two things that you need to remember. And then we know that there are some joints in which there is no direct contact with the articulating bones, between the articulating bones, and this type of joint is actually called as a synovial joint. So I am making what is called as the joint capsule. Look at the diagram very closely. So these are the two articulating bones. They are not having any contact directly. There is a space, as you can see, and this is where there is a cartilage which is present. And what type of cartilage is the articular cartilage? If you remember from your tissues, please try to remember that. And then inside the joint capsule, you will have a membrane, and this membrane is called as the synovium or the synovial membrane. And you can see that the space enclosed by the synovial membrane would be called as the synovial cavity, and they allow the maximum amount of mobility, and that is why we say that they are what are called as the synovial joints as well. And obviously you can enforce this type of joint by the presence of something, a connective tissue which connects a bone to bone. If you remember this from your class 11 chapter number 7, this would be a ligament. So this would be a ligament. I hope this thing is now absolutely clear, the structure of the synovial joint. And just now I have told you the types of synovial joints. So remember, ball and socket. Have you seen the video clearly, and can you tell me the two places where ball and socket joints we have discussed? The second thing, please tell me the two locations where I have told you the occurrence of the pivot joint. So where are the pivot joints located? And please try to tell me where are the gliding joints located. So these are the type of synovial joint. Just now, just a few minutes back, I showed you their location in your body. So you should be able to recollect. And do you remember the hinge joints? Apart from the knee and the elbow, did I tell you anywhere that hinge joint is also present? Now, do you know something about the saddle joint? And this is a very, very peculiar thing and a very important example. Do you remember something like this? Can you hear the click when I do something like this? Do not try this at home. Something like this. This is where the saddle joint is present. And finally, I told you something about condyloid or ellipsoidal joints. So these are the joints. We already know what are these joints and where are these location. And this is the part where most likely they can ask you a question, direct factual question. Let me see your NCRT. So we have finished the discussion on the joints as well. Now there are some disorders of the skeletal system. So let us look at the possible question. Myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune condition. In this, the antibodies are formed against the neuromuscular junction. Obviously, you expect muscle weakness, and a lid lag is a common symptom. This is the thing that you must remember. The second thing is muscular dystrophy. So there is a word which is given, dystrophy. So this has to be a degeneration of the muscle, probably most commonly because of what are called as the genetic diseases. So there will be a genetic cause, there would be a degeneration, and this would be progressive in nature and very, very debilitating conditions. Then there is tetany. So we all know hypocalcemia increases neuronal excitability, and if the neuronal excitability is increased, it will stimulate the muscle, and muscle will undergo repeated contraction, and then the muscle contractions may become fused, and this thing is called as what is called as tetany, and the tetany is caused by hypocalcemia. Remember, hypocalcemia increases neuronal excitability. Arthritis, it is itis. We know that itis is the word for inflammation. So this is what is called as inflammation of joint, and there can be the common variety because of the overuse and wear and tear with age, and this type of thing is called as osteoarthritis. So there is a very common variety what is called as osteoarthritis. Most of the people will get some osteoarthritis with age. There is a gradual wear and tear. This is what is called as osteoarthritis. There would be a rheumatoid arthritis, and rheumatoid arthritis would be again an autoimmune condition where antibodies will be formed against, if you remember that, a joint capsule and the articular cartilage, and will lead to the destruction of the tissues and will frequently lead to the deformities. So this type of arthritis would be called as rheumatoid arthritis. One more type of arthritis may be possible because of excessive purine metabolism. There is an accumulation of uric acid in the joints, and this type of arthritis is called as gouty arthritis. So if you look at your NCERT, these are the type disorders that are given. There is one more condition which is called as osteoporosis. A very important thing to remember is that bone is primarily made up of the collagen network, and then there are concentric deposition of the lamellae of the salts that include calcium. So a deficiency of calcium can lead to the weakness in the bone and recurrent fractures that may be because of the deficiency of vitamin D, which is called as rickets, and commonly maybe because of a renal condition in adult as well, which will be called as osteomalacia. But this time we are looking, say for example, in perimenopausal and postmenopausal women where the amount of estrogen is decreased, and this estrogen is involved in collagen synthesis, and because of the other component being deficient, there is bone weakness, and therefore the postmenopausal women frequently complain of bone pains, and they are very likely to get recurrent fractures, and therefore we frequently advise them to undergo what is called as bone densitometry test. I hope this was a useful discussion of the facts that are given in your chapter.